We began with a question. How can these things happen? How does it happen that a separatist movement from the other side of the world flourishes in Canada after killing hundreds of Canadians?
These guys have figured out Canadian politics.
Beautiful day.
How can hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayers' money be handed over to a temple that is being sued for financial mismanagement? And how can a mass murderer be revered in public as a martyred hero?
Well, Triminder Parmar is a martyr of the Sikh nation.
Yeah, I love him. He's a great man.
How does it happen that people openly wear the colors of a group banned by Canada's government as a terrorist organization? And what about school kids parading with machine gun logos on their jackets?
The guns, cross guns were on the jackets. That were pictures, not real guns.
Prime Minister Stephen Harper wallo.
Then there are the politicians. How come they're so quiet about the glorification of violence?
They're cowards, they're politicians, not statesmen.
Well, they are being opportunistic.
There is, of course, no single explanation for why the Sikh separatist movement still prospers and has political clout in, of all places, Canada, where the atrocity of the Air India bombing still reverberates 22 years later. Still, for most Sikhs in Canada, separatism is just part of the parade on Vaisakhi Day, and there's nothing quite like a Vaisakhi parade when the weather is fine. It's the birthday of the Sikh religion, and it's fun. The big moment is when the so-called five beloved ones set out with their swords to escort the Sikh holy book on its special float. It's a family day full of drums and good food and eager politicians. After all, Canada's 400,000 Sikhs are a politically plugged-in community with their own Punjabi radio stations and newspapers. They can mobilize voters in many swing ridings, especially in BC and Ontario. And many of them do still dream of breaking up India to create Khalistan, an independent Sikh state in Punjab. So it's only natural for politicians to try a little Punjabi. But this kind of politics does not please everyone.
I'm sick and tired of the sari and the samosa politics of all three political parties.
Tariq Fatah is one immigrant from Punjab who smells something rotten in Canada's ethnic politics.
Why would somebody come to this country and want unity of Canada but the breakup of India? Does any politician have the guts to ask these Khalistanis, what is it that you are looking for that you did not find in the bloodbath of 1947 when India was first divided? It takes one guy with an exotic-looking dress, a big beard or a huge headdress to say, Mr. Member of Parliament, we will work to defeat you. Or we can deliver you 10,000 votes.
Of course, it is normal for all kinds of groups to court politicians, and that includes the World Sikh Organization, the WSO, which recently invited all MPs to its annual parliamentary dinner. The WSO is a separatist group which often supports liberals, and quite a few liberal backbenchers turned out. But there was only one Conservative MP, one from the NDP, and among the liberals who stayed away was a Sikh MP who is wary of the WSO.
WSO has played a very large role in the most recent leadership of my political party, to which I belong.
And what's wrong with that? World Sikh Organization? Isn't that a respectable organization?
Well, you know, World Sikh Organization was born in the throes of violent speeches. Its foundations were very violent.
It is true that the WSO's founding convention was an angry affair. It was 1984 in New York, and that was where Ajab Singh Bagri of Kamloops, BC, made a notorious speech urging Sikhs to massacre Hindus.
आपनु भरोसा दिवाना है जिन्ना चेर तक 50,000 हिंदू ਅਸੀਂ ਕਤਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਸਾਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਲਵਾਂਗੇ.
And it wasn't just Bagri. The WSO crowd cheered him on. Indira meant Indira Gandhi, India's Prime Minister, later murdered by 2 Sikhs. But all of that is not ancient history. It lives on. 2 decades later in Ontario, the Punjabi media still runs front pages like this one in a paper closely linked to the World Sikh Organization. It honors the 2 Sikhs who killed Indira Gandhi, calling them martyrs. Another front page in the same paper honored 2 more Sikh assassins who murdered a retired Indian Army general. But legal, mainstream political action is the style today, and last year's Liberal Leadership Convention in Montreal was an example. Some 250 Sikh delegates were recruited for Gerard Kennedy, and they followed him in a block to help put Stéphane Dion over the top. But some of the other delegates didn't like what they saw.
What I saw was that many of these delegates didn't know how they were voting. I would go to them and they would say, I don't know, ask my husband. Witness to all of this.
Tariq Fatah was a Bob Rae supporter. He says blocks of delegates were being herded and told how to vote by power brokers on the convention floor.
It is not just the Sikh delegates. There were a whole bunch of Muslim delegates as well that were being bartered this way. If one person can hire 2 buses full of delegates, drive them, pay for their hotel and their breakfast and their food and drive them back, you tell me what's happening.
Did that happen?
Of course it happened.
But horse trading at conventions is hardly unusual. What was unusual to Bob Rae's supporters was that some Sikh delegates objected to Rae bringing up the Air India bombing.
And we listened to the families whose loved ones had been killed by
In fact, my wife was approached by a delegate who happened to be a Sikh, not supporting Bob Rae, and didn't know who my wife was, said, Bob, you shouldn't vote for Bob, because Bob expressed the issue of violence about Air India in his speech.
We should never, ever forget the human tragedy and the human cost of what happened on that terrible day.
That didn't seem controversial, but Rae had written a report on the Air India bombing, putting the blame squarely on Sikh separatists. Desange says some Sikh delegates didn't want to hear about Air India.
You know, it baffles me that you have delegates on the floor of a major political party to which I belong who do not want a reference to Air India in a candidate's speech.
Right Honourable Prime Minister has the floor. Order.
All of this soon led to charges that the new Liberal leader was beholden to Sikh supporters with an agenda. And that is what Prime Minister Stephen Harper implied when the Liberals decided to oppose a law which touched on the Air India file.
This is how the Liberal Party makes decisions.
The Liberals shouted him down. It was all very confusing. What exactly was the Prime Minister suggesting? At the heart of that noisy political scrap was the RCMP's continuing criminal investigation of the Air India bombing. For more than 2 years, the Mounties had been planning to hold a round of special investigative court hearings under the Anti-Terrorism Act, which allowed them to compel testimony from reluctant witnesses. Now, that process has nothing to do with John Major's judicial inquiry, which is not allowed to look at criminal responsibility. That's the RCMP's job. But now, the RCMP's plan for those special court hearings is dead, because the opposition voted down that section of the Act, and the RCMP was not pleased. Deputy Commissioner Gary Bass, who led the Air India probe for years, said of the vote, without doubt it represents a serious and damaging blow. In Vancouver for Vaisakhi Day, Stéphane Dion disagreed.
Are you concerned at all that you did a serious blow, as the RCMP put it, to their investigation?
I don't think so at all. I don't think so.
You're not concerned? Let me make sure I understand your answer.
My answer is that it did not hurt